Hi, I'm Becky Davis with City TV. Welcome to Inside Santa Barbara, the city's only news magazine show. We bring you up to date on the city's most significant issues, projects, and events. By now, we've all heard about El Nino and the possibility of the heavy rain it may bring to Santa Barbara this winter. In fact, NOAA meteorologists are predicting a 75% chance of heavier than average rainfall. During this special episode of Inside Santa Barbara, we're going to show you how city departments are planning and preparing to get our community ready for this potentially historic and intense El Nino season. First up is the Public Works Department. Get ready, Santa Barbara. That's the message the City Office of Emergency Services wants us all to take to heart as this winter approaches. In our homes, workplaces, and vehicles, the time for residents to prepare for El Nino is not when the heavy rains are upon us, but before. And advanced preparation by the City of Santa Barbara and other local agencies is no exception.
For disasters, we need to be able to talk to each other and know what we're doing. So it's not just city departments, but how we relate to other departments and other agencies. So how we relate to the county, how we relate to the other neighboring jurisdictions, how we relate to the American Red Cross in regards to sheltering, the volunteer organizations active in disasters, which is VOAD, how we relate with them. And so by working together, we know what we're doing. You know, we have tabletop exercises, we have functional exercises to be able to kind of find those gaps in our capabilities.
As part of those tabletop exercises, the agencies looked at past strong storms like those that occurred in 1995 and 2005 and reviewed measures that have been put in place to improve both how we prepare and how we respond.
There's always areas that we learn, and there's been a lot of changes since 2005. In 10 years, we have better relationships with the National Weather Service. So we're constantly getting updates on what the weather is. The flood control put weather stations at each of the creek levels and watershed areas so we can monitor the water and get that right away. We have a weather station in our EOC, an Emergency Operations Center. So by having those kind of things happening now, when we didn't have just 10 years ago, gives us that much more of an edge of being able to be prepared and getting the information out, not only to city staff, but to the community.
When the rain does come, the amount of flooding that occurs depends a lot on the infrastructure that conveys that water safely to the ocean.
There's a lot of different language to kind of explain the same thing. It's a flume, a culvert, a waterway, a V-ditch, all of these things kind of collect water at the edge of the road or in a low spot in someone's neighborhood. They lead it to a storm drain, or they lead it through someone's backyard out to the street, and then to a storm drain. So it's just a way to channelize the water.
In an effort to keep water flowing smoothly, the City of Santa Barbara Public Works Department has been spending extra time getting ready for rain.
Something that we do in preparation for the rainy season is clean the storm drains. We open up all the little manholes or access doors to the catch basins and drop inlets, and we give that a visual inspection to the box and clean it out, any debris that's in there. And we'll check upstream and downstream and make sure there's no debris that's going to wash in there. And we do that all over the city.
Public Works has also been using cameras to inspect storm drain pipes, deploying additional Vector trucks to suck debris out of storm drains, and they've been cleaning out culverts in the public right-of-way all over town. However, the city stresses the importance of private property owners doing their part.
It's in the municipal code, that's one thing, that you have to keep your waterways clean. It can impact your neighbors. If the water goes out of your flume and onto your neighbor's property, your neighbor's going to be upset with you. All of that water is supposed to eventually get onto city property, get into a city drain. But if you don't keep it clean, there's going to be problems down the road, and then you'll be calling the city, and the city's going to turn around and say, well, that's your own drain, that's your own culvert. It's your responsibility to maintain it.
And during a heavy rain event, Public Works crews will be out in force.
The city's broken up into 8 different storm drain maintenance sections, and each section gets a 2-man crew. And so the crews are familiar with those areas that clog fast or have a small diameter pipe or are in low-lying areas that require more maintenance than the other storm drains. So they'll frequent those areas to keep them free of debris and to keep those flowing. And hopefully they can keep it maintained during the storm.
If you have concerns about a storm drain or culvert in your neighborhood before or during a storm, call the city's storm drain hotline at 564-5458. The responsibility for flood control in much of the city falls under the jurisdiction of the county. Up next, we hear about what county flood control has done to prepare for the rainy season. Despite being in a drought, flooding is still a threat to our city. In fact, Santa Barbara has experienced some of the most significant flood events to date just in the last 2 decades. Now that we're in one of the strongest El Niños on record, it's especially important that we're prepared.
The amount of press the El Nino phenomenon has gotten has raised the awareness of the public for the flooding issues that can hit anywhere in our county. Fact of the matter is, we can have flooding in any given year. So we prepare for a big year no matter whether it's El Nino or not. In fact, in the city of Santa Barbara, some of the biggest flooding we've ever had in 1995 was not an El Nino year. So we can't put all our eggs in a basket of preparing for El Nino. Now that said, we do recognize that El Nino does cause a threat. The correlations with past rainfall years are clear that when you have a strong El Nino, the likelihood of additional rainfall or a high amount of rainfall is very good. So we need to be prepared.
Whether heavy rainfall is in the forecast or not, the county works year-round maintaining and improving our waterways to reduce the risk of flooding.
We really have 2 major programs to address flooding in our community. One is our maintenance plan, our maintenance program. And our maintenance program takes existing channels wherever they are and attempts to just keep those channels open and flowing. It doesn't seek to provide capacity or to do any changes to the creek. The other element is capital projects, or actually physical improvements to the creek channel, like we see here. In this case, we're actually taking an element of the creek and making capacity improvements. We're on Lower Mission Creek right now. This project's been in the works since the 1960s. We're actually physically widening the creek and increasing the capacity.
The Lower Mission Creek Flood Control Project has been a joint project of the County Flood Control and Water Conservation District and the city. The project will more than double the creek's flood flow capacity from the existing 1,500 cubic feet per second to 3,400.
Right now, currently in the city of Santa Barbara, the main project is the Lower Mission Creek. It started out as a Corps of Engineers project, and we anticipated getting federal funding to help us build this. The federal funding hasn't really materialized, but we recognize the need of the project. So using our own money, we're slowly implementing the project on the lower end of the creek, starting at the ocean, and then all the bridges along the way, of course, are being completed by the city. So the 2 are meshing together. Upstream of us here, we have the Mason Street Bridge, which is being done by the city, and then the actual channel improvements being done by the Flood Control District. Downstream of us, we have the Cabrillo Street Bridge, which is being done by the city, and then the channel reaches upstream, a cooperative project between the city and the county.
Lower Mission Creek is just one of the many projects that the city and county have worked together on to improve flood control.
The Flood Control Districts worked with the city of Santa Barbara on a number of projects throughout the city. We put major storm drains in the city, like what we call the East Side Storm Drain over on the east side. That was done in the 60s and 70s. More recently, in the 90s, we completed the West Side Storm Drain, which had a lot of storm drain improvements on the west side of town. And then there's the actual creek corridor improvements like Mission Creek, and then there's debris basin improvements up in the El Encanto area. So all those projects find a particular need and address that problem, and then they're implemented in coordination with the city.
While the county will continue to plan for droughts when Cachuma is full and prepare for floods in the dead of summer, it's still important that residents do their part to prepare for weather-related emergencies as well.
Our flood control annual maintenance plan has been just recently completed. That starts back in March, even before El Nino was really known that it was going to be a big phenomenon. We work most of the major stream channels through the city of Santa Barbara. Just because that work's been done doesn't mean that there's no longer a flood threat. Not at all. There is still a flood threat in the city of Santa Barbara. When this project is completed, there will still be a flood threat. We're hoping it's minimized, but it's not eliminated. So the public needs to be aware of whether you need flood insurance, at a last chance sandbags. Sandbags are available at the county yard out in Cayarial. And also an emergency plan for what you need to do in an emergency. Do you need to evacuate? Do you need to shelter in place? Do you have a place to go? Have you taken care of your pets? So all of that is something that individual property owners and residents should be doing.
For more tips on how to prepare for flooding, visit ready.gov/floods. When a storm strikes, our waterfront is one of the areas most affected. With the potential for more storm activity due to El Nino, the waterfront department is busy preparing. City TV's Sierra Kalman gives us an overview.
Harbor can be a crazy place during a big storm. We got a lot of things going on. We have parking lots to secure, facilities to protect. We could have large waves moving pilings and popping deck boards on the wharf. We could even be evacuating the wharf. We could have offshore rescues. So it's all hands on deck during a big storm.
Because large storms can cause such mayhem in the harbor, the Waterfront Department has a comprehensive plan in place to prevent damage, mitigate impacts, and ensure public safety.
We've ordered K-rail. They're going to have front loaders. We're getting sandbags together to protect the harbor commercial area, and we have a whole operational plan as to how to handle storm drain dumping into the harbor, bringing debris, and operationally all our patrol boats are, as they always are, up to snuff and ready to go. And we're ready on all fronts.
Due to its location, the waterfront is inherently susceptible to damage from large waves and high tides. When the two coincide, the situation is particularly hazardous. To protect the most vulnerable areas, sand berms are constructed.
We build a sand berm in front of these facilities every year. It's been very effective. It's a soft solution, so we don't have to build seawalls or some of these other structures that cost a lot of money and have their own adverse impacts. We can take it down so we can allow coastal access most of the year. The sand berms prevent large waves from running up into the harbor commercial area and flooding some of the businesses and flooding into the parking lots.
The location of the sand berm is just as important as its size.
The city commissioned a study several years ago to decide the best way to protect these assets and these facilities. And some of the options were building seawalls and rubble mounds like the breakwater. And they decided to go with a soft solution that they could put up on a regular basis. So we have two sand berms. One protects the harbor commercial area. And we also place a sand berm just east of Stearns Wharf. And what that does is it prevents Mission Creek from flowing underneath Stearns Wharf and undermining some of the piles and allowing storm debris to flow into the harbor.
And while there is a break wall, waves and high winds can make conditions inside the harbor treacherous as well.
I remember years ago crawling on my hands and knees on Marina 4 because there were so many waves rocking the dock. I couldn't even walk on it.
During these storms, boaters are advised to stay in the harbor and secure their vessels well.
Come down, check their boats out, look at their dock lines, look at if they're old or afraid falling apart. We just recommend maybe doubling up or getting new lines.
Mariners caught in storms are always offered a safe harbor in Santa Barbara. Because of the potential for damage and hazardous conditions, the Waterfront Department informs harbor residents, businesses, and visitors about an approaching storm in a couple of ways.
We have the necessity to reach out to folks, tenants, boaters, anchor outs, everybody we can get to let them know a big storm's coming and advise them as to appropriate actions. We have two methods of outreach. We have our own unique reverse 911 system at the waterfront. It includes all our tenants, all our slip permittees, our mooring permittees, and it also includes the El Estero wastewater plant staff. That's separate from the rest of the city's reverse 911 system. And we also have a web-based messaging system that's called Blackboard Connect. We usually use reverse 911 when an emergency situation is imminent. When it's coming, we know it's going to be very dangerous and people need to be alerted as soon as possible. Blackboard Connect, like I said, typically it's used as a generalized messaging system, but in an emergency situation where we need to keep people consistently informed, we wouldn't repeatedly use 911, we'd use 911 in combination with Blackboard Connect.
Through its preparation, sand berm construction, and weather alert system, the harbor stands ready for the next storm season.
Right now, on a beautiful sunny day, we're in the preparation mode. The response mode will come when the El Nino really does slam us, and of course, in between storms and after it's all come and gone, we'll be in the recovery mode to make sure we end up with a beautiful harbor like we have it today.
For more information on waterfront storm preparation, call 564-5531. Stay tuned, we'll be right back with more Inside Santa Barbara.
In a disaster, it's not just your needs you have to consider. All members of your family have to be ready. Don't forget the pets.
I grew up here. I've made memories here. I love being able to drive around knowing that this is my community. I'm helping my community.
We care, and we want to make this community a better place.
This career is for someone who wants to be challenged deep down inside to better a community.
It's the best job in the world. It really is. It's like a dream come true. Join your home team.
Welcome back. We've all heard some scary predictions about El Nino recently, but what's fact and what's just hype? City TV's Chris Bell traveled to the National Weather Service office in Oxnard to get some answers.
Godzilla El Nino.
Called a Godzilla El Nino event this winter.
With an attack by Godzilla, but
by now you know it's coming. A monstrous phenomenon of epic proportions. Yes, this year's El Nino is one of the strongest on record, but beneath all the hype, what can we expect from it in terms of massive storms and heavy rainfall?
Remember, it's the strength of the El Nino. It doesn't necessarily tell us anything about what we're going to get this upcoming winter.
That's right. In spite of historic weather precursors, there is a chance we won't see exceptional rainfall at all this winter.
However, during those past 6 strong events of the past, every one of those has been above normal for Southern California, especially the strongest events. That's 1982-83, 1997-98. Those 2 events have been almost double or more precipitation during our winter months. There's not going to be a Godzilla coming out of the ocean and attacking California, but we're expecting more storms.
They may not have been Godzilla, but those 6 strongest El Nino events caused a lot of damage. So while there's a chance this year's El Nino will be a dry dud, the odds are in favor of wet weather. So what should you do to stay on top of the weather?
If people just stay aware of the weather this winter, we'll hear about when these big storms are coming in, and we'll be prepared, and we shouldn't be surprised by any of these storms that we anticipate coming up.
To get the latest local weather forecast and warning information, go to weather.gov/Los Angeles.
We're the local weather source, so we're only looking at 4 counties in Southwest California, from San Luis Obispo down to Los Angeles County. 24 hours a day, we're looking at those areas to provide a 7-day forecast and then any type of significant watches or warnings when we do have severe weather.
The National Weather Service has the latest satellite and Doppler radar information and issues weather-related advisories, watches, and warnings. What's the difference between a watch and a warning? During a watch, you need to be alert. During a warning, you need to take action.
A watch means there's potential for something coming up later on, so you should stay alert. So maybe 24, 48 hours in advance of a storm coming in, we see the ingredients coming together for the potential for flash flooding. So we'll put out a watch, meaning you should stay alert. We're not quite there on the confidence, so we want to look a little closer as it gets in closer to us to make a decision on what's going to happen. And then when we start to see these storms come in with the rain on the radar, and we start to see the heavier potential for rain, we may issue a warning, which means it's imminent or it's going to occur. And that's where you should take action. A warning is the worst case possible, where it's a threat to either your life or your property.
And if flooding does occur, remember this National Weather Service catchphrase:
Turn around, don't drown. TADD. So if you see flowing water across the road in front of you during a heavy rainstorm, you never want to drive into that water.
Moving water can quickly float a vehicle. In fact, it only takes about 1.5 feet to 2 feet of water to move a vehicle. Sadly, most flood-related deaths in the U.S. have occurred because drivers have disregarded this fact.
You don't know if the road is there. It may be scoured away, so you have no idea how deep it is. And even walking into water, people get into trouble. Only 6 inches of fast-moving water can sweep you off your feet. And then you're in a terrible position at that point and maybe need a rescue. And that's where you're putting somebody else's life in jeopardy as well to rescue you.
In case you missed it, the website to go to for the latest weather and weather-related advisories is weather.gov/Los Angeles. So far, we've heard what El Nino is, what it can do, and how to keep track of it. Coming up, we'll share some tips on how to prepare for large storms and what to do when things get ugly.
If the past is prologue, we know what to expect from this year's El Nino.
Fallen tree branches, maybe down power lines, power outages, so people need to be aware that this is going to happen and be prepared.
In reality, storms during El Ninos are the same as those of non-El Nino years. The difference is that the storms can be more numerous.
So during past strong El Ninos, we've seen more like a dozen significant storms where we see one or 2 inches of rainfall at the lowest elevations. During a normal year, they may only see 5 or 6 storms.
More numerous storms coupled with high winds equates to lots of coastal damage and erosion. It also equates to saturated soil, which can lead to flooding. Knowing this is beneficial in that we have time to prepare.
So this is the time when we get our sandbags, when we kind of look at our house, what shape our roof is in, our windows, make sure that everything's in tip-top shape. And this is the time to create our ready kit.
That means going to the grocery store and stocking up on enough water, food, and supplies for you, all family members, and pets to last at least 5 days.
Non-perishable food, because if we do have a power outage, then make sure that you're equipped, right, to be prepared for that. Warm clothes, some blankets, closed shoes.
Before the storm is also the time to examine your property to determine where you might need to do some work.
So clean the gutters, the downpipes, anything that might cause some sort of damage, and making sure that our roof is in a good condition too, because there's folks that haven't checked their roof in like decades.
One of the most effective yet overlooked pre-disaster procedures is the creation of a family communication plan.
So having that plan of where you're going to meet, right? If you can't get to your house because there's flooding or whatever, there's a down power line, some down tree branches, how are you going to get from point A to point B, right? So having a place to reunite in your neighborhood and then outside your neighborhood. And then we talk about having an out-of-state contact person, an emergency contact person, and that's important too, so you can communicate, because we don't know if maybe the cell phones might not be working, or any form of communication that we're used to utilizing, it might not be working, and so we have to have those alternatives.
Another tactic of the family communication plan involves taking the road less traveled.
I keep challenging folks when I do training or preparedness talks, that they take alternate routes home to and from work, right? And just challenge themselves for when that disaster strikes or those floods come or those strong rains, they actually have ways of getting to and from.
If you are going to drive when the weather's bad, you have to make sure your vehicle can handle it.
Especially the tires, making sure that they're not worn down, because then you end up on a slide.
Something else to consider is safeguarding your important documents.
You might need to evacuate right? And so you need to have that ready, right? Having your documents, I strongly advise folks to either make copies, hard copies of them, or putting them in a flash drive, or, you know, putting them in a cloud somewhere, and just having them stored in a safe place.
And no matter what the disaster is, it's always critical to stay informed.
We need to be aware of what's going on, and it's our job to know if, you know, there's roads that are closed or whatnot, how to get to work, and just being informed, staying tuned on the news, on the radio, and that's also an important part of our kit, because we need to include a hand crank radio or a battery powered radio.
Staying informed also means registering your cell phone number with the reverse 911 system. That's because cell phones are not automatically registered. So if you, like many people, don't have a landline, you won't receive the important information this service provides. Registration is simple and can be done at sbsheriff.org. Finally, the last tip on how to deal with stormy weather may be the easiest.
We strongly advise for folks not to drive unless they absolutely have to in a storm.
You see it a lot back east, where a lot of people are in those flooded areas and they end up sliding off the road or sliding into another vehicle. It's better just to stay home.
For more information on how to prepare for El Nino and severe weather, visit ready.gov. If you live in a flood zone, one of the ways to prepare for flooding is with sandbags. But do you know the best way to fill and use them? Up next, City TV's Jeff Goodvin teamed up with the Public Works Department to put together this helpful demonstration.
This winter, weather forecasters expect a better than average chance that the El Nino weather pattern could bring heavy rains, which may result in flooding. This year, the motto is be prepared for rain, don't wait until it's too late. Whenever a flood watch is declared by the National Weather Service, the City of Santa Barbara offers free sandbags to residents at the City Corporation Annex Yard on Yanonelli Street, where you can self-fill as many as 20 bags per trip. Here's a few tips on how to properly fill the bags for the most effective use.
Now, one of the things I'm going to demonstrate right now is how easy it can be to fill a sandbag. And what you want to do is just fill it halfway. That way it can form an overlapping situation when you put down the bags, okay? So what you want to do is get your scoop. You're going to put it between your legs and squeeze, and you're going to create a small opening, right? Just like that. Then we're going to fill it, let the sand do the work. It'll fall right in. Just a little more. Squeeze it, pull it out, and there you go. You got a nice halfway filled sandbag. And what you want to do when you tie it, you want to tie it close to the top, but not too close because it'll come off. Tie it just like you tie your shoe. That way, if you're going to add sand or remove sand, it's very easy. When you double knot it, it becomes a little bit harder. Okay? So now what you have is a sandbag that you can maneuver and move around and lay overlapping to the other sandbags that you've made. All right, now I'm going to go over a few tips on how to place your sandbags. Now remember, sandbags are for water diversion. You want to divert the water away from your property. So if it's coming down the street and your driveway may be in the way of the water and it might go in, this is a good way of putting your sandbags down to divert the water away from the entrance of your garage. Another tip for a doorway that you can use is pretty much the same thing. Lay down the bags as to they divert the water away from the front of your door. And again, lay them out as long as you need to where the water gets away from the front of your door.
The Public Works Department also wants you to keep in mind the annex yard is a busy place, so the public is asked to be careful when entering and exiting the facility.
Remember, the city offers sandbags whenever the National Weather Service declares a flash flood watch. To prepare ahead of time, you can also purchase sandbags at most local hardware stores. Stay tuned, we'll be right back with more Inside Santa Barbara.
No way you're gonna pick that up. It's easy to bag it up and toss it in the trash. Come on, it's natural. It's basically fertilizer. If you consider bacteria-laden feces fertilizer that'll wash into the storm drains and flow into our creeks and oceans. You want to swim in that? Swim in that? Swim in that?
Remember, the ocean begins on your street.
We had just been informed that the National Weather Service had declared a flash flood watch.
Officials are saying that residents of the Mission Creek area need to prepare to evacuate.
Be radio ready.
If the county does declare a flash flood warning, then residents of the area will be told to leave their homes.
Know where to go for information during a disaster.
Some roads are closed, and I've been told that the county is providing sandbags for free to homeowners at fire stations.
To find out which stations are radio ready, go to awareandprepare.org.
Welcome back. Heavy rainfall this winter could pose some unique challenges for keeping Santa Barbara's creeks and ocean water clean. Luckily, the city's Creeks Division is on the case with a number of programs that help reduce the negative impacts of stormwater runoff. City TV's producer Matthew Meyer has more on how the Creeks Division is getting ready for the rain.
Much needed rainfall in the coming months, and potentially a lot of it. While the downpour could certainly bring drought-busting benefits, the rainy season can also raise environmental concerns. Especially at the Santa Barbara Creeks Division, the city is preparing for the challenges that this winter has in store.
Well, the purpose of the city's Creeks Division is to improve creek and ocean water quality through the city. The biggest water quality problem we have is runoff, urban runoff and stormwater runoff. So the rainy season is a big season for us in terms of trying to protect water quality and also trying to monitor water quality.
With this goal in mind, the Creeks Division is hard at work, long before the first raindrops begin to fall. To start, the division conducts a thorough sweep of the city's creeks for trash and other pollutants. During these special staff cleanups, the entire division gets their hands dirty to help keep the creeks clean.
Before the rainy season, we want to make sure we take care of as many of those pollutants as possible. We do significant trash cleanup in the creeks all year long. Right before the rainy season, we go out and we walk from the beaches up to the mountains and remove every single piece of trash to keep the beaches clean and keep that debris out of the ocean. It allows Creeks Division staff to get in and see the condition of the creek as it's changed. We get out there once a year, we get to see the entire length of the creek, and we can see the changed conditions from year to year, where the creek needs attention, where we can make improvements for the creek habitat, as well as restoration efforts to improve water quality.
In addition to clearing the creeks themselves, the Creeks Division also manages a number of projects that will help deal with impending stormwater runoff. Recently installed permeable pavers are one low-tech solution that should make a difference.
Permeable pavers are paving blocks that allow rainwater to pass between them and down into the ground below. And so when it rains, the water falls on top of the pavers, goes in between, and it passes through some layers of rock, which filters the water and also provides a storage space. And then below that rock is the native soil. And the water can then soak into the native soil and be available for plant roots, be available for excess groundwater moving to the creek, and then also replenishing deep groundwater.
To make sure the project operates as advertised, the Creeks Division installs sensors at each site before the rainy season.
Put these in before the rainstorm, drop them down like so, put our cap on, replace this, and wait out the storm.
Once the storm has passed, the water level loggers will provide the Creeks Division with important information.
So if we know that the water level loggers show us that all of the stormwater was infiltrated, we can then estimate the amount of pollutants that were treated and infiltrated.
The Creeks Division isn't only planning to monitor their permeable paver projects. They'll also collect stormwater samples from local creeks when the rain begins to fall. Unpredictable weather requires the division to stay prepared for sampling at any time.
We make sure we have safe access to the creeks at all of our proposed sampling locations. So we're continually trying to test for more emerging contaminants so that we know which ones are a problem. And sometimes we'll hear about a new pesticide or something, and then we'll test for it, and we don't find it. And so that's one that we don't really need to pay too much more attention to. And other times we'll find something that says, oh, we need to develop some PSAs now, we need to do some outreach, we need to do some additional testing, maybe do some grant writing.
While some of the division begins to address the contaminants, other members of the Creek staff head out on the town to see how the city is handling rainfall. The Creeks Division hopes to see that they've successfully educated the community on best management practices, or BMPs.
Best management practices can apply to anybody on any property, and they involve practices that you can exercise or put in place to clean or treat the water before it runs into the storm drain or into the creek and out to the ocean.
BMP checkups give the Creeks Division a chance to see where the city succeeds in protecting water quality and where improvements can still be made.
I think the easiest thing for people to do, if you live near a creek, make sure you don't have any kind of debris in your yard that's going to wash into the creek during the rainy season. Even if you don't live near a creek, same thing, keep fertilizers, paint, oil, things like that in an area where it's not going to be washed away by the rain and get into the storm drain system and out to the creeks.
Between the simple efforts of Santa Barbara residents and the Creeks Division's careful preparation, our city has taken important steps toward keeping our creeks and ocean healthy this winter. It appears that Santa Barbara is well on its way to being rain ready.
For more information about the Creeks Division or how you can keep Santa Barbara's creeks clean this winter, visit sbcreeks.com. In our town, lots of rain means flooding, sometimes severe. To prepare for the unique types of rescues that flooding necessitates, the Santa Barbara Fire Department has a special team of firefighters that train for these types of scenarios. Up next, we take a look at what they do to prepare.
Swift water is one of those tasks that it's a low frequency, very high risk operation, but as with many of our things, house fires, brush fires, urban search and rescue kind of stuff, we've got to continually prepare for it. What we do with Swift Water is we do small things annually, and then as part of our urban and search and rescue, we do it in a 2-year rotation. So we incorporate that into our search and rescue stuff. In years past, I think it was 95, we had Mission Creek spill its borders, and we've had people in apartments, older people, animals and stuff like that, where we've gone in and loaded them up in boats and walked them out. But Swift Water is just a very dangerous place to be, and so we've got to prepare our people for everything. So our classroom has refreshed our folks with our most current SOP. Our policies have been a little bit altered since years past, so we refreshed them on SOPs. We talked about some verbiage and language that we would use with someone in a creek or the river. And then what we did is we went over to Oak Park, and of course it's bone dry right now, but we went over there and simulated some water rope bag throwing stuff. And we had the guys practice, and the goal, what we'd like to do is get a bag thrown and coiled up and thrown again within 20 seconds. And then we also did what's called a tension diagonal, which is an in-water rescue process where we would run a line from shore to shore on a 45-degree angle and use the water as it comes down to move you across and potentially rescue someone on a rock or on the hood of a car or something like that. We have some pre-designated locations where we would send certain crews to. With anything in the water, we deploy upstream spotters and downstream safety. So whatever's happening here is going to change, very quickly. So we want people upstream to be looking at trees, shopping carts, whatever's coming down to identify for our rescuers what's coming. And then downstream is if what we have here isn't successful, that we have a backup plan downstream. We've got more trainings planned for this winter. We are going to get the crews out to all our reporting locations, if you will, places that we would have a chance to make a rescue. But a lot of those locations that in years past have been usable locations are all grown up. There's trees where we used to go in some cases. What we see today in dry conditions may be different than a slight rain, may be different than a big, downpour. So, it's incumbent upon us to get out there and see our drainages and our creeks and see what they look like and make sure that we're ready for anything that might happen.
To make sure you're prepared for any disaster, visit santabarbaraca.gov/OES. Every year, the City of Santa Barbara gives out the Water Hero Award to recognize businesses, individuals, or organizations that have gone above and beyond in their water conservation efforts. Up next, we find out who this year's winner is and what they did to earn the award.
You could change these sprinkler nozzles to rotating nozzles that put off water in a really slow pattern, kind of like a spring rain shower.
The Water Hero Award began in 2011 to highlight those in the community that are setting an example of resource efficiency with lasting water-saving actions. This year's award winner is no exception. The Eucalyptus Hill Homeowners Association recognized how much water their lawn areas were using and decided to do something about it.
Because we're an older HOA, we've been here since the early 70s, we have a lot of land, so that's a luxury for us. We're not dense, but having a lot of land, our water bills were very, very high. And we absolutely think that changing over and modifying to a more water-wise landscape will help us over the years. So that was one of the reasons why we wanted to do this.
After determining they wanted to remove the lawn, a committee was formed to discuss what the next steps would be.
The most challenging for me was just that I didn't have any idea where to start. So, we formed a committee and we looked at options, and we decided that just replacing the lawn wasn't going to work because the original landscape was from 1973. And so then we approached the board with, can we do more?
But before they could do more, they had to gain approval from the 27 homeowners that are part of the Eucalyptus Hill Homeowners Association.
We were pleasantly surprised when the majority of the homeowners, after a lot of education from Barb Calder, agreed to overwhelmingly voted in.
I think the biggest thing that we did to help get the homeowners on board and get them to agree was we had Aaron Carroll draw a plan for us, and it was in color on a full sheet. And we brought it to the annual meeting last year, and we talked about, and we were all excited, all of us that were on it. The board was excited, and have a color drawing that shows new pathways and all these plants, and then people got excited.
After getting everyone on board with the project, they hired a contractor to remove the lawn and a landscape architect to replace it with a beautiful water-wise garden.
The plant choice out here was kind of driven by the fact that we've got an existing canary palm and existing queen palm. It's sort of subtropical Mediterranean out here. So we decided to kind of go with succulents and drought-tolerant subtropical type plants. So this is the blue atlas palm. It's a slow-growing palm. It was chosen here to maintain the views. It won't get too tall in the immediate future, and it's very drought tolerant. Here's a type of cycad that not everyone is familiar with, Encephalartis species. And these cycads have been around since the dinosaurs, so they're very sturdy plants and quite prehistoric looking and interesting. This is one of my favorite aloes. It's called Aloe carpenteria gem, and it gets a bicolored flower of yellow and red, which kind of makes it more interesting than the typical tree aloe. This side of the garden is a lot more dominated by California native plants, because we've got the existing oak trees over here. And this is the western redbud, Cercis occidentalis. It's not in its prime here in the fall, but in the spring it gets a really lovely bloom of pink flowers. Another small patio multi-trunk type tree. This is Arctostaphylos sunset. Gets about 4x4 flowers, will attract birds and butterflies.
What was once nearly 5,000 square feet of turf is now a beautiful waterwise landscape that will require only about 1/3 the amount of water.
Basically, we ripped out all the spray heads for the old lawn, installed new drip valves, put in new backflow preventer with pressure regulator. The pressure here is really high, and drip systems like lower pressures. And we put in a smart irrigation controller and weather sensor on this side of the clubhouse there.
The biggest difference is if you look at the entire area that was landscaped, you went here from watering the entire square footage to, if you look at it this way, say there's 100 plants, you are watering 100 plants in one spot, and each plant might take up a square footage. So you've gone from 1,000 square feet or whatever the number might be to 100 square feet.
In addition to saving water, the homeowners are happy with the look and low maintenance requirements as well.
I think the value to the community is, as a whole, we feel a part of the water saving efforts for the city. And Kathy Paré at the city was excellent and very helpful in her guidance by coming up and walking us through the steps that were needed to get our rebate, and that was very helpful. And I work at Village Properties. I'm a realtor. I do a lot of real estate transactions around the circle, and I've always heard that the landscaping looked too old-fashioned. I think it helps property values overall.
The most rewarding part is to see it. I think the finished job is beautiful. I think Aaron Carroll, our landscape architect, did a great job. It was very fun working with Cold Springs Landscapes, who did the work, and so that for me was the most rewarding part. And I think the community as a whole have been great, very positive.
Congratulations to the Eucalyptus Hill HOA for being this year's Water Hero. For more information about the award or to view past winners, visit santabarbaraca.gov/waterhero. Well, that does it for this episode of Inside Santa Barbara. If you have any questions or comments about the show, you can give us a call at 564-5311. If you missed something, not to worry. You can watch the show online at santabarbaraca.gov/citytv. I'm your host, Becky Davis, and remember to get involved inside Santa Barbara. Now we leave you with the talented San Marcos High School Madrigal Singers performing Songs of the Season at the Santa Barbara Airport.